All right. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday session with HGP, the Humanists of Greater Portland. My name is Anand Atre, and it is my pleasure and privilege to be your MC for today's event, which is being recorded. HGP believes strongly in freedom of speech, but I must state that the views expressed by myself, our reader, HGP members, and our guests at today's meeting are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. For those of you who are new to humanism or HGP, humanism represents a progressive way of thinking that is informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. A humanistic approach to life is grounded in reason and our shared humanity, making a humanistic lifestyle one that aligns with social and planetary responsibility. Humanistic values are not based on appeals to external deities. Instead, they are formed when humans use reason and reflect with empathy on our experiences, collective needs, and capacity for flourishing. Paramount among these values is the commitment to uphold the dignity of all human beings. Let me now turn the proceedings over to our reader for this week, who is Dave Pebworth.
Some of you may remember during the first Trump administration and before the pandemic, I appeared as His Majesty King Dave. And since all the No Kings protests, I decided that might not be a good idea, but I still want to do what I can in my own weird way to help the future generations. And so as the students start back to school this week, I start thinking about what could we do to reduce school shootings. And I looked up, and in the 1990s, they started to treat gun violence as a healthcare crisis, as a health crisis. And the CDC, Center for Disease Control, started a violence prevention center. And then in 1996, the NRA was afraid that we were biased against becoming biased against guns. And so they got the Dickey Amendment to a budget bill that prohibited the CDC from using anything that would further gun control. And they didn't eliminate the Center for Violence Prevention, but they transferred its $2.6 million budget required it to be for traumatic brain research only. And so it's believed that this could be overturned in the courts, but no federal employee didn't want to risk their career to try it. And so that's where we stand. And so I think to prevent school shootings, what we need to take a little bit different of, folks, so bear with me. In 1957, my high school driver's education class was shown a video of called Violence on the Highways, or death on the highways. And it depicted pictures of accident victims, rather gory ones. But then later I found out that I remember three of them. There was one of twin preschoolers on a morgue table. There was one of the lower part of her torso and legs actually stuck high in telephone wires. And the third one I remember was a skull and part of a brain on the back shelf of a sedan. And so I thought, well, I found out later when I became involved in defensive driving that people just tended to forget about it, block it out. And so the films themselves didn't do any good. I came up with the idea that I want to request that one day a month, the president, vice president, and cabinet members meet in the cabinet room. The senators meet in the Senate chambers, and the House of Representatives meet in the House chamber to sign off on coroner's photos of gun victims, school shooting victims. And since the Dickey Amendment, there have been over 220 school shootings. And so if I believe that if the senators and representatives and cabinet members saw the violence of the shootings, that they could do something to work around the Dickey Amendment and get some research done or do something about it. And so I don't know if it would actually if they could actually come up with something, but they would at least know what the problem is, which is their responsibility. And if they don't do it, I can only assume that they are cowards and they're afraid they will faint or vomit at the sight of a child's body so mangled that it had to be identified by DNA, or they just don't care. The other thing is, when I was growing up in Sunday school, I got the belief that we cannot see God, and but we only see God through other people. Like, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus that we see every Christmas. And then as I got older, I read the Bible from cover to cover twice, and I don't recall anything, or I've never heard it preached in 50 years as a churchgoer, that God protects groups of children against arrows, spears, or swords. And so I assume if the president and the senators and the representatives fail to sign off on the coroner's photos of gun accident victims, that either God doesn't care or he doesn't exist. So thank you.
Our session this week comprises an open discussion on what it means to be a good citizen in today's world. It's a topic that is on most people's minds these days, and there has been material produced and distributed to the general public to that effect. One such piece is a PBS documentary called A Citizen's Guide to Preserving Democracy, which draws from Richard Haas's book, The Bill of Obligations. Background-wise, Richard Haas has spent decades as a diplomatic insider, serving as director of policy planning at the State Department under Colin Powell and working in the Pentagon under both Bush administrations. He also led the Council on Foreign Relations for 20 years, where he advised several members of both the Democrat and Republican parties. This is someone who has operated at the highest levels of American foreign policy. The PBS documentary delves into what Haas sees as 10 essential habits that strengthen our democracy. Now, I've sat through the entire documentary, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. Watching it left me profoundly unsettled. And I'll tell you precisely why after we air a short 10-minute video that we've provided and created that provides the crux of the message. So I'll request Dave now to air that video, and then we'll delve into our discussion.
We have to choose someone.
Why just us? We represent all the great houses, but whomever we choose, they won't just rule over lords and ladies. Maybe the decision about what's best for everyone should be left to, well, everyone.
Maybe we should give the dogs a vote as well.
I'll ask my horse.
Democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy requires people to suit up and get on the field.
It doesn't matter whether or not you're Republican, Democratic, Independent, whether you're in the Green Party, it doesn't really matter as long as you're here for America to be better.
And we resonate to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who and I'll paraphrase, who said, you know, we hate each other because we fear each other, and we fear each other because we don't understand each other, and we don't understand each other because we don't talk to each other. And our goal with this Great Lakes Civility Project is to get people to talk to each other.
And that's what I love about the service I'm involved in Iowa through the American Connection Corps. It's precisely that, it's connection. And when you can connect people together, that connection takes on a life of its own.
We are here for New York City Civics Day. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of civics.
I love the idea of having more people who are younger to be involved in democracy, because this is going to be our future.
This is for the people, right? It's a public place. The common good of being able to reach people, the common good of being able to reintroduce the library to people who potentially may have thought that it wasn't for them.
Hey Renee, welcome in. We had over 300 people come to our events when we were collecting ideas. We collected over 1,300 ideas for how this money should be spent.
Very first time that the city of Evanston is doing it, making sure that all voices were being heard.
I think the stakes are huge. Whether we succeed or not is going to say a lot about the future of democracy and how successful this democracy is going to be for generations.
Hi, I'm Richard Haas, author of the book, The Bill of Obligations, The 10 Habits of Good Citizens. From Thomas Jefferson, wherever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government, to Barack Obama. This democracy doesn't work if we don't have an informed citizenry. One constant is that an informed citizenry is central to a democracy. The most obvious reason to stay informed is to be able to wisely cast your vote and to hold those elected accountable. But what makes an informed citizen? Someone who understands the fundamentals of how our government operates. Someone who knows about our country's history and appreciates how that helps to explain where we are now and the choices before us. By contrast, a less informed citizenry can be a threat to our democracy. It's easier to be influenced by disinformation and conspiracies, and to give in to those making false claims and promises. So how can you get informed? Seek out a range of sources for news. If there is a political bias, get a second competing opinion. Go to news outlets with rigorous fact-checking. Learn how to tell the difference between news and opinion, and don't rely on social media. The most basic way to get involved is to vote. There's no better way for citizens to get the policies they want and to hold representatives accountable. But there are other ways to get involved. Getting involved and participating allows you to become a true stakeholder in your community. Whether it's advocating for specific causes, attending a community board meeting, volunteering for a campaign, or going to work in government. Contributing to the decision-making process actively allows your voice to be heard on issues that matter to you. Compromise inevitably involves choices, even risk. Weigh the pros and cons of compromise, not against perfection, not against getting all you want, but against getting nothing, which is often the true alternative. Stay open to compromise. It's worth it. Compromise is also essential to get things done in any situation in which power is distributed among many hands, which is the case in a democracy. Remaining civil is about the golden rule. Treating others as you would want to be treated, respecting them no matter how much you might disagree. It is needed if there is to be compromise, if relationships are to be preserved, so you can work together on other issues down the road. What civility is not about is censorship. We're living at a time rife with a lack of civility, but politically charged conversations can offer opportunities for learning and deeper understanding and persuasion, but only so long as they are civil. Political violence has no place in a healthy democracy. Nothing justifies it. It risks bringing about a society where rights must be sacrificed to maintain order. Violence that is politically motivated undermines your ability to persuade and bring others along. And what's more, violence discredits and distracts from whatever cause you are advocating. We think of ourselves as a nation of laws, but democracy requires more than laws to function. Citizens must embrace and insist on valuing norms, the unwritten traditions, rules, customs, and codes of conduct that reduce friction in a society. Observance of norms from accepting the outcome of elections to accepting higher standards for those entrusted with power, is essential for democracy to be successful. There are both moral and practical reasons to care about our fellow Americans, from religious teachings to moral philosophy to simply doing what is right. This is not only the basis for most volunteerism and charity, but it's also essential for living together. Acting in the common interest also serves selfish purposes. Contributing to society and the economy helps us while helping the whole. If you litter in the park, the next time you go for a picnic, you'll be surrounded by trash. Or if someone fails to return a library book, you'll be delayed in getting to read it. Masks, which can be an inconvenience, both protect the wearer and those around them from disease spreading. Rugged individualism, which has long been celebrated in America, is on an upswing. But it is essential to remember that the collective, the public good, is what makes our society strong. We must balance our rights with the rights of others, and we must balance our rights with our obligations to others. Respecting government service helps a democracy flourish. From the military and state offices to youth corps and the post office, there are millions of government employees who play a critical role in our daily lives. It's important to acknowledge their service and say thank you. We want the most talented among us to enter government. We will all benefit if they do. Government matters. No people should assume that their history, their heritage, and what is essential to it is widely known or automatically handed down. Collective identity has to be taught. Schools and colleges, for the most part, aren't teaching civics, or if they do, they aren't necessarily teaching it well, or requiring that all students take these courses. As a result, we're failing to pass down the essentials for what it means to be an American and a citizen of this country, about why democracy is worth preserving and what it requires of all of us. Still, I'm encouraged when I see teachers finding creative ways to teach their students about civics, about American history, and their rights and obligations as American citizens. We need more of this in the years to come. This country will only succeed. This country will only be in a position to provide you what you need if citizens put the interests of the country before their political party or their own ambitions. This is what President John F. Kennedy had in mind when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." It's also what he had in mind when he wrote the book Profiles in Courage, where he celebrated Americans who are willing to do the right thing in the face of pressures and incentives not to. That's my take. To learn more about how to be a good citizen, go to pbs.org/preserving-democracy.
If we could just pause it at that slide, please. All right, so brilliant, right? Case closed. We can all go home. We've saved democracy, right? It's all sorted. What comes across to me in this video is someone who's speaking from a diplomatic soapbox, bringing us 10 habits as if it's some kind of civic gospel. They read less like practical suggestions and more like 10 commandments. The religious one, for those of you who are religious out there, don't see too many of you, but they're handed down from someone who still believes that if we all just follow proper protocol and maintain good faith, democracy will magically repair itself. But here's what Haas fails to address. What happens when a significant collective has abandoned these habits entirely? What do you do when being informed, staying civil, and respecting norms becomes a one-sided game? How do you compromise with people who reject the legitimacy of compromise itself? How do you teach civics to a generation watching elected officials ignore constitutional principles in real time? These are the harder questions that Haas's diplomatic worldview simply doesn't grapple with. The questions that arise when traditional good citizenship meets an unprecedented assault on democratic institutions. And these are the questions I want to kick our discussion off with today. So with this discussion, we will follow the protocol that we used during Early Birds. Rather than raising your hands function, if you want to make a comment or ask a question to the group if you're on Zoom, just type your name into the chat and I will moderate that and call you to unmute your mask and ask your question. If you're here at Friendly House, we're going to start off with just raise your hands if you want to make a question, or rather if you want to raise a question to the group. I'll open that up to the floor. Who would like to get us going? Either your reaction to the video. I've got some other questions. I had a feeling John Daggett would. Okay, John, what would you like to bring up to the group?
He focused on teaching civics, but he didn't talk about learning. And you can teach all you want, but it doesn't work unless someone learns. And the teacher must be a learner as well as the student. And I think that is an element that he left out. Another point is something from the Dalai Lama. He said, most of the problems with our environment and our loss of good political practice comes from a lack of awareness of what's going on. We are so busy possibly making ends meet. We're so busy with our own lives. We're not aware of what is happening in front of us. And I think those two things need to be put before a list of 10 commandments.
Okay, very good. So we've started off with civics. We've gone to education, different modes of education, whether you start off with a didactic approach or something of an ongoing approach, different modes of education, and also the idea of thinking outside of the box and moving away from what you're doing on a day-to-day business and maybe not being fixated on actually what you're doing and looking and being aware of what's going on in the outside world. Anyone else? Barb, go ahead.
We need to be careful given the average age in this room, and given when I talk to my nieces and nephews and grandkids. So when I'm for you all as well. Like I grew up teaching in the 90s when we still taught civics, and they're, you know, those kids are now whatever, 45 or 50 now. But the kids who are growing up now, who've grown up completely with social media, completely with a just a corruption and the influence they've seen. I think the question of how we bring this back, this strikes me that this guy's talking very much to people our age. It's all reasoned and it's all things we can agree with. But I don't think if you put this out to 30-somethings or 20-somethings, you would necessarily get the same thing. So my question is, how are those people going to engage? And how is that going to bring back democracy? Both their voting, their participation, when they have grown up in this hyper-individualized, hyper-online world.
Okay, very good. So we're talking about a difference and political engagement depending on the generation gaps. That's a very, very good point. It's one that we've experienced through human history. I think particularly in Russian literature, if you read Ivan Turgenov's book, Fathers and Sons, it's a brilliant literary comparison across that. Anyone else? You've had it up.
So my problem with this 10 habits of good citizens, and also I think with what you said, is that it's also vague and open to interpretation that people who believe the exact opposite things both believe they're promoting the common good, for example. Right. You know, someone who's very evangelical and pro-life and anti-immigrant believes that they're valuing norms, promoting the common good, respecting government, teaching civics, etc. And someone who believes the exact opposite of all that will justify their view as promoting the common good and so on. So if this language is so vague that it doesn't really mean anything, it's used to justify completely opposite viewpoints, then is it really useful at all?
Very good point. Things in terms of how we actually interpret things and what do you define to be the common good. If you take a utilitarian approach and if you look at it in terms of what should that actually be and what your norms are and what you should think are unprecedented and unquestioned, that can actually justify two very, very different scenarios.
So it's like this doesn't say anything.
You can rationalize things, and this is a very abstract thing without providing anything tangible. Yep. Who else?
Just a data point. The last election primary in Clark County was in August. Our turnout, I worked the election. Our turnout was 27.4%. So that's just a data point.
Yeah. Mary had her hand up. Go.
My impression of this is it's commandments for how to exist as a citizen within a functioning machine. I'm thinking of my civics education, which was perhaps more recent than some people in this room, but it was only about 3 months in 2008. And I remember the prevailing sentiment from it was democracy works the best because we have balance of powers, we have the different branches of government, and I think none of these really help to be a good citizen in a broken system where we have an executive branch that is completely overturning and disregarding the powers of judicial and otherwise. So it sort of just reads very flat to me that it's not something that can help exact change within our community.
Very good. And I think you and me had a very similar reaction, as did Dave Danucci. Dave was probably a little bit more extreme in his comments to me, but okay, go ahead, Doug.
I want to bring up just one example to sort of illustrate his broad point. It started out with be well informed. Again, if you take a MAGA person, they're going to say, I'm well informed. Take a member of the American Communist Party, they're going to say, I'm well informed. Take all kinds of people are going to say, most. Very few people are going to say, geez, I'm just hopelessly not informed. So this business of being informed, I want to focus there on one thing that can perhaps be constructive toward not simply patting ourselves on the back, and that people of all persuasions, that we are well informed. I learned to ask some years ago when I got into hopeless discussions that were going nowhere, to eventually ask, hey, is there any topic on which you recognize that you would, no matter the amount of evidence, no matter the type of evidence, you would not change your mind on that topic. You are 100% loyal and locked in on that. And many people would say to me, God, and I'd say, okay, if you give yourself permission to say, I can deny all kinds of evidence in any amount, I will not change my mind. So then I'm done spending my time with you here, because I will tell you conversely that there is no topic of any kind on which I give myself permission to say I will not change my mind. I have insisted with myself since I was somewhere through my 20s that I'm going to be able and willing to change my mind, which is to say, I can look at yesterday's position, my position up to this moment, and say, I was wrong. That just turns out to not be well supported. I'm going to change my mind. And so, to me, part of the solution to this involves finding ways of persuading ourselves that we have to be open to change. And when we quit that, it's all down the drain. and to somehow persuade our fellow citizens of the vital importance. And that's an impossible task in some cases, because you can't persuade them in a single conversation. Maybe you can in the long run, that you really, really have to be open to change, because that's antithetical to a bunch of stuff that they use as anchor points.
Thanks. I'm actually furiously writing down notes so I can try and take a lot of what you've said and concise it into a final thing that will make me sound somewhat intelligent on the matter. But I think that what you've talked about is what the philosopher Susan Stebbings has called cherished beliefs, which is there is an emotional attachment towards certain ideas where people, regardless of the amount of counter evidence that seemingly refutes it, would still hold on to those beliefs and not be willing to do it. And I think as humanists or as scientists, if you generally believe in open inquiry, you need to be able to challenge your cherished beliefs. And that includes these habits. And they may need modification, they may need changing, they may need abandoning. And so I think that's a large part of being citizenship as well. Great comment. Our peerless president, Ann Henderson.
I was interested in what Preston said about the 27%.
27.4.
27.4%. The main gist of what I'm hearing with all of the pundits and everything else is the fall of democracy, and yet the people that you're talking to want to know what the price of eggs is, and they just don't get the fact that it is the fall of democracy. And how can we, get that out to the people that are just trying to do their jobs and, come home every day and, and get food on the table and all that sort of stuff, when that's what they're concerned about is the price of eggs and and their jobs and all that sort of stuff. And they just think, it's business as usual. It's business as usual. That's what keeps me up at night.
So sleepwalking the day-to-day, it's the lack of awareness that John had mentioned early on, but just sleepwalking, forgive the Santo and Johnny reference, but just sleepwalking through your day-to-day routines and just not being aware of what's actually going on. That's something that you find concerning? Yeah.
Mike, after our glass of wine, where you try to come up with a couple of dynamic things, I was asking you to save your dry powder for today. Please go ahead. Yeah.
I don't have one glass of wine. I probably forgot, but I don't want to find a Joyce Lackey on Zoom.
Okay.
Needs.
Okay, we'll let Joyce go first then.
Yeah. And I don't really have anything.
Joyce, do you want to go?
Yes, I think that you could call me a Pollyanna, but I still think that he did make a point that's very important about trying to save democracy, and that is talk to each other. And Helen and I have learned the difficulty of getting to find someone on the other side who's willing to talk. But I still think that that is crucial to anywhere we're going to go. So if we could even encourage our politicians to set up maybe formal kinds of meetings where we want to talk to both sides. We know there are plenty of conservatives in Oregon. They're just not all right next door to me, although some of them are. So I have to argue that I've been talking to people even since we disbanded our building trust group, and I have a certain reaction to that, and that is that I find myself less tolerant of the kinds of silly or fun or satirical kinds of things that progressives are putting out online, or at least people who consider themselves progressives, and making fun of the other side, that sort of thing. And I'm not as tolerant of that as I used to be. So it's only a little step, but I do think that it has to be part of the steps.
Do you want to say a little bit more about the Building Trust Group? Because not everybody here would be too familiar with it.
Oh, Helen Christians and I started, what year? At least 5 years ago, I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, a group to bring liberals and conservatives together to talk. And we struggled to get it off the ground. We went to parks. We set up our tent in the parks. We had meetings here in Friendly House, trying to draw enough conservatives to have a fairly balanced conversation. We finally gave up going to the parks. Oh, that was because of COVID. In COVID, we decided we were stuck. So I can't remember if we went totally to Zoom or how we did that. But even once we got back to meeting in Friendly House, I had to tell more members of HGP not to try to join us because we wanted to keep it to 5 so that we could get at least 5 conservatives to come and talk to us. We never quite made that. One evening, we had more conservatives than we did liberals out of 4 or 5 years. So we finally decided, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. But so that's what happened to Building Trust. It got rather frustrating.
Our final meeting, Pete, we had such a horrific, bigoted man that was upset that Joyce and I were leading the meeting and not a man. And all of a sudden, Pete just started putting away the chairs, putting away the table, and said, "Meeting's over." That was it. We were done.
Exactly.
Oh, I was just gonna kind of piggybacking on what Joyce said and also what Ann said is, I think what we might need to focus on is how we start that communication is the commonality that we all have, and part of the destruction of democracy. You could go all the way back to Reagan. You could go even further back, but more recent times with Citizens United, corporates corporations being able to get involved in our political process, which then has just led to all these oligarchs being in control of our government, etc., which is why we have this rise of, rent, eggs, etc., and that we all are feeling that pain. We're all feeling that income disparity. And, if we start with that common experience that we're all having, and instead of pinpointing it to Trump or pinpointing to the Democrats, pinpoint it to who is really the cause of it, which is capitalism and the corporations and the influence in our government and which has destroyed our democracy and things like that. And if we go from that point, that we're all hurting. We're all struggling with paying for eggs. We're all struggling with paying for our rent, etc. That's how we start those conversations, and understanding that we together as a people are stronger than those other forces, and that's how we join together.
So this is brilliant, and it's a brilliant way to actually transition towards a more productive way in terms of what we can be doing rather than complaining. One, two, three things I'm just going to draw from what Doug said, what Liz said, and what Joyce said. I think rather than just taking habits or any sort of ideas as unquestioned, what Liz has actually come up with is the idea of using common experience that the vast majority of people are experiencing and finding common ground and justifying that experientially rather than as some type of commandment that's handed down from somewhere from an abstract theoretical level. And that's a better way of actually connecting people regardless of who they may be. The ideas of building trust, if you look at Gordon Allport's contact theory, you can actually meet people in a particular environment where if you're prepared to listen to them and have engagement with them, rather than mocking them and launching ad hominem attacks on them, trolling them on social media, if you can meet them in a respectful way, you can gradually build trust. But it needs to be in conditions where you don't view it as us versus them. It needs to be a recognition of humanity, someone who's had a different experience, and perhaps try and understand them a little bit better.
All having together, and they heard his message and believed it, even though we all know that it was a lie or what have you. But that's why they voted for him. We all want the same things. We all want to be able to afford to live, to be able to have a good life, etc., for our kids to be safe. We all want that, and that's the commonality, and we need to focus on that versus how we get there.
I'll go to Preston and then Al and then Doug.
I think the conversations between all the concerned is really important. I am my favorite way of doing it now is through ranked choice voting. But that's just my opinion on this whole concept. I think more importantly, as far as ranked choice voting goes, is that I am willing to give them time, and I am willing to give them reasonably large resources to make this happen. And we need to do both if you can afford it. I think the financial resources are really important to give to these organizations. And if you don't have that, and maybe both, you need to give some time to this whole process. We need to be involved.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point in terms of getting us involved and coming up with productive steps in terms of how to get involved beyond Haas's idea of just voting. Okay, Al.
If I look at that list, I say, oh, most of these things are either to fight change or make change less likely, or to when change is a thing that we really need, because the system is so bad to us at the present time. So how do you change things? I'd replace the whole list with support strong benevolent institutions and fight corruption. And you can take all the rest of that stuff.
So Al wants to abandon the whole status quo and tear things up and go again. Okay, we'll go with Doug and then John.
So is this Liz?
Yeah.
I much of what you said, the rhythm is right. There's a lot I agree there. And to Joyce's earlier comment about when we get cute and sarcastic and funny and attacking, it's not good. And I've been trying to self-monitor for some years now that I don't pass on in social media something that I thought was really spot on, but sarcastic and cutting and nasty. All that being said, I want to gently push back a little bit, Liz, with the broad brush of we all want the same things, because there's a lot out there now that I just think needs standing up to.
I agree.
And I won't say we all want the same things. I recently shared a post on Facebook written by a lesbian woman in her marriage, and her now it looked in the picture like upper teenage son, maybe an 18-year-old son. And her point in her substantial paragraph, but it covered a lot of details, was you guys out there who think you're voting for a border wall and think you're voting for cheaper eggs and think you're voting for this, that, and the other thing. No, you are supporting a group of people who want to impose all the details they want to on a bunch of people's lives. You are voting to hurt me. You are voting to hurt mine, etc. And so I'm appreciating much of what you said, but I want to push back on we all want the same.
I'll be honest, one of the most humane things I'm doing right now is not engaging with Trump supporters, because I know that I can't have a humane interaction at this time. I'm still pretty angry. So I totally get it. But I also understand that the main driving forces for where we are is because of corporate, greed and into our government, and also the false messaging that he gave them, making them feel like that he was addressing those needs. And the silencing of Bernie, to be honest, and AOC and all that stuff, because he was a counter to that and he was silenced. And again, that goes back to corporate greed and all that stuff. This to me looks like, as soon as I saw these 10 things, I was thinking to myself, oh, strongly worded letter by Schumer. That's what this is right here. It's reacting as if we're still in a democracy when we're not.
Okay, so on that note, what I will do is maybe get rid of that, because it seems to be provoking a negative thing, and I'm going to go in the Joyce angle and move to the more Panglosian side. So we'll go with John. Oh, wow, this is brilliant. We're going to go with John, and then Anne, and then Skylar, and then Barb.
Well, I really support the idea of being careful about what we find humorous. And I think that's what a lot of people are talking about right now, because I don't have a television. And I have to admit, I do get online and I look at things, try to look at it carefully. But I'm sick and tired of people making money, making fun of the opposition. And all these, I don't even look at them, these headlines. Oh, we've got him now. He's really cornered, or he's doomed now, or he meaning Trump. It's BS. It's just, it's to sell a click, to sell something. And I think we must be very careful about what we enjoy at the expense of the true values. And thinking about values, I think we've got to go to what drives values. Values are driven by what he calls norms. I would call principles. These are things that transcend. Before you get to a law, you have a principle, you have values, and then if laws are going to work, you've got to have those things in place that we live by. As a person who worked with unions and management, if you had a practice that you followed, it became a law. It was a policy. It could be held up in a grievance, and that's what we need to have is practices or principles that transcend the law. Thanks.
Go ahead, Anne.
Well, John, I think I'm gonna go the opposite way from you, because sometimes I feel that the trolling, like what Gavin Newsom is doing right now, makes my heart happy.
Well, he's not a humorist making money.
No, he's not. But
I think there's a difference.
That's true. But I really do enjoy all of that. And at this point in time, you gotta have joy at some point in time. The other thing is, I can't go to sleep at night without listening to Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers and all those people who will make me smile and go to sleep, feel like, well, somebody knows what's going on, that sort of thing. So it really is a good thing for me. That's all I'm saying.
Skylar, you were next.
Right, so I apologize for the math, but it's 27.4% of people are like,
Yeah.
And this is in a state where you're voting, you can register to vote at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Easy to post.
And you can mail in your ballots for no cost. This is as easy as you can make it.
Which puts us at roughly like 13-14% of people who are, this intractable group that we can't have conversations with. And that leaves 73-ish% of people who just don't care. And that seems like why are we focusing on conversations with MAGA when we can focus on the 73% of people and make MAGA irrelevant?
That's a good point, Skylar, because it moves things in a very productive idea in terms of what you actually can be doing from a constructive perspective. And rather than actually trying to convince someone and switch their minds from what they have as a
belief, try and focus on the people and raise awareness. It's a great point, Skylar. Yeah.
I was just traveling recently, and I was so taken by how strangers don't talk to each other anymore. Everyone's on their phones, everyone. And so I wonder what we can do individually to put down your phone and try to engage, to talk to people, to say hi, hello. Because I really think that the commons used to be, you'd be standing in line with somebody at the grocery store, or you'd be sitting and waiting for a bus or whatever, and you could talk to people, and that gave you more and better faith in people. But as I listen to younger people, they're more fearful, they have less faith in people, but it's largely because they are on their phones all the time and they aren't engaging. So I really think we have to reclaim some kind of public area where we are phone free and we are interacting with other people, all of us.
So making public areas great again.
Yeah,
well, I would just say in response to that, I do this thing now where I'm sitting in a Kaiser waiting room or wherever I am, I just don't pull out my phone. Yeah. And I try to make eye contact with people. And if somebody looks at me, I start talking to them.
I've been doing that too.
Imagine that.
Good idea. Jump on them.
Jump on them.
Okay, Margie had a hand up, and then Mary, and then John.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things on that list that I think could apply to both sides in politics. And that is be civil and reject violence. But then mentioning what Gavin Newsom is doing, why should we continue to be civil and be run all over by people who are not being civil and never try to fight back? If we can do it with humor, so much better. But reject violence, I think is what's said. I certainly think that's a good one. I don't know how you could argue with that.
Well, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, so Mary and then John and then.
A couple thoughts circulating, what's already come up, but in going back to sort of the 73% of people we're not talking about, perhaps, I think I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but I think about this really huge non-voting percentage in this country and who is in that group and who that represents. And it's sort of across the board of people who are so privileged that they can not engage and it does not change their day-to-day. There's people who are so trapped in their day-to-day that they can't think at this large, broad scale level because they're concerned about the price of eggs. And then there are people who are so deeply disenfranchised in this country that it has not mattered whether or not they voted or who has been in power because they have not been served by the system. And so I think, how do we reach people like that and promote this democracy and promote our country first or whatever was also on the list in a meaningful way that actually engages with them and enacts a certain change that is meaningful and purposeful to them, that would encourage them to participate in democracy and in this society. And then my other thought circling to this idea of everyone's on their phones and nobody's having conversations, civil conversations anymore. And as somebody who's chronically on my phone and looking at all these conversations, it's sort of like who's most vocal in a room, and especially in an anonymous room, are the people who are loudest on both ends of the spectrum. And so we lose that massive middle ground of really reasonable, average people. They're not necessarily moderate, but they might not be so extreme on either end. And I've found myself discouraged in conversations because I'm not going far enough. And so I think, yes, I don't have a thesis here, but just a lot of thoughts about who the common man is and how we're engaging with them and who these people are.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point, because it's not a homogenous message in terms of the outreach. It needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. So there's going to be different messaging, and so it's what makes awareness raising and reaching out quite difficult to do, but not impossible. Would you like to go first, and then I'll go to John?
A lot of thoughts.
So yeah, let them all out.
As the representation of the 20-year-old, I guess.
There you go.
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, please go ahead.
Still 29, but I think a big part of the problem is more and more technology means that we are more comfortable just looking at our phones and we can get directly to the president. Like we can't really do much because they have decades and decades of working into the roots of the government, but at least we can call them names.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think a lot of my generation just feels really hopeless, because that's all we can do is point and make fun, and we lost the ability to really have conversations with people who have different opinions from us. Like even just my little sister, as soon as something gets controversial, she will leave the room. Just avoiding those conversations. Yeah, and when it comes to talking to people who have different opinions or just about politics in general, I think it's about that education. It always goes back to education, practice, and confidence. I know people who they have a friend who seems super confident with their opinions, whether they agree with those opinions or not. They seem to know what they're talking about, so I'll vote however they're voting. I think there's a lot of that going on as well, and just a lot of that undeserved, misplaced confidence that people are just drawn to follow.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, and especially your perspective actually gives us more insight in terms of how some of the younger generation are thinking about things, which is helpful for this group. I think Barb, you were next, and then I think Helen Christensen. Go ahead. You didn't have it? Okay. Helen. Oh, it was John. John wanted to go next. Sorry. Yeah.
This is a digression, and I love to do this in the groups.
So do we.
I attempted to stop someone or to stop a couple from being on their phones. I was coming back from working out, and it was just at dusk or a little bit at night, and this young couple was under a street light. Teenagers, upper teenagers, looked like they really cared about each other. They're both on their phones, and they're right next to each other. And I walked out of the dark into their line of sight. And I said, "Hey guys, put down your phones and hold hands." And it just freaked them out. What? In public or whatever. Anyway, I'm not going to give up.
And things like that can make us all shiny, happy people. So, sorry, I'm loving these music references. Helen, did you want to make a point?
I did. I want to comment about the lovely lady that's
sorry, what's your name? Allison. Okay.
Allison. Last night I was able to visit with my neighbor. I watched him grow up. First day, he was a baby first day I met him, and now he is 40. And he's been in a gay marriage for the last 15 years. And Trump wanted, during Trump's first campaign, he was pro-Trump all the way. And I'll never forget it. It's him saying, Helen, they'll never touch gay marriage. They'll never touch gay marriage. I think you're crazy. And this guy's going to really make things happen in a good way. And I shook my head. Last night we had dinner. I met him for dinner, and he's a wreck. He's supposedly a case has been accepted by the Supreme Court that will challenge gay marriage. And he said, I think the federal government is going to deny gay marriage. And I said, oh, and I became like, oh, gee, that'll never. He said, Helen, they got rid of Roe versus Wade. Of course, they're going to get rid of gay marriage. Yeah, and he's distraught. He said, well, be okay as long as we live in Oregon, but maybe. I mean, unless but he's like, we've been married for 15 years. That could happen. And he's no longer a Trump advocate. He didn't vote for Trump in the second time, but I thought this was a kid, a young man. But he has certainly seen the light. I mean, he was just distraught yesterday. So things change, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think through history, whenever there's been situations like that, a large part of the population have basically been thinking if it doesn't impact them personally, they're not really willing to do anything. And this is probably where at least the tenets of humanism come in helpful, because
to try and understand someone else's perspective and fight for the marginalized, which I think is a crucial part. Margie, and then Mike.
Well, in relation to what Helen said, I think, and I hope that a whole lot of people are going to come to realizations like that as time goes by. And the other thing, talking about talking to people, I have never liked small talk with strangers. And I don't fly anymore, but I used to. And whenever I would get in a plane in my seat, I'd buckle my seatbelt and get on my book.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I would get somebody next to me that wouldn't shut up. And, you know, I just don't like small talk. If we got something to talk about, fine. The people you don't know, I don't get it.
I apologize for that flight. I mean, it just seemed like you wanted to engage in conversation outside.
Well,
so, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, we talk about young people and their cell phones and all that. Well, there's a key battleground in the so-called cultural war in America, and that's who's going to educate kids in public schools. And there's so many competing people who want to shove their agenda into the curriculum there. And come on, Mike, you can do this. There's got to be some rules agreed upon, you know, that will benefit everybody. And I think one key thing is if you're want to shove your religion, you know, into people's faces in school at that age, I think they should be asked directly by all those who are going to be affected by it. So what about the kids who will be on the receiving end of what you're teaching about? Like, you know, LGBTQ plus kids, or kids from Muslim families, or other minority religions, or no religions at all. I think anybody, regardless of their, you know, approach, should be asked, you know, how do you think this is going to affect the opposition? If they come up with just some long-winded non-answer, they should be about as welcome at that campus as an active shooter or a child pornographer. Because just like the same thread, it seems certain personalities just don't care what they do, what their policies do to other people.
Yeah, and it also raises the question: is what constitutes education versus indoctrination? So, I'm going to let Dave DiNucci jump ahead because he hasn't spoken yet. So go.
Well, I think that and several other things touch on this whole concept of what we have in common, or what we should have in common. And I think that's where the whole video started, was this idea. I mean, this guy was voicing principles that weren't one side or the other a couple of years ago. I mean, they were like, well, yeah, at least we can all accept that we should know what the government should work like, and we should, you know, be willing to talk and that sort of thing. And now even those basic principles are kind of being questioned. It struck me the other day, I saw a quick video of a recent Bill Maher show, and something came up about Trump, and somebody on the panel was like, well, no, this is how it should be because Trump was attacked, and therefore it should be a tit for a tat to make everything equal. So he should be attacking everything that Biden ever did. And also, I mean, you know, Nixon wasn't so bad either, and he did great things, and he will be elevated, and the FBI was after him, and that's why he got taken out. And so we see this splitting of history, of everything that we've accepted up till now, and kind of put into separate camps that make it so hard for us to take anything as a common basis to have these conversations with. I will also mention, I just had my 50-year high school reunion, and suddenly, I mean, at the reunion, one of the most important questions of, am I going to talk to this old classmate, is what direction have they gone politically now? Are they now a MAGA or not? And, you know, I will figure out who I want to talk to in my classes.
Yeah, no, the reciprocity of ad hominem attacks and my other music references is that we're not moving in one direction. Okay, I'm going to let Joyce go next, and then I'm going to let Anne after that. So Joyce, go ahead.
One of the things that's bothering me is that if people are moving away from Trump, if they become unhappy now with the price of eggs going up after with the tariffs, if they just decide to go, where will they go? The Democrats are bleeding, and I don't understand it. I don't understand why there's so little awareness of what Biden was trying to put into place. I don't think many of them even know about the major initiatives he started in his first term, well, in his first year. Those things would not come to fruition until the third or fourth year anyway. So do we need a new party? Some people are trying that. Do we need to help the Democrats reframe their message? I'm interested in trying that. But where are they going to go?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think if you look at the New Yorker, the mayoral race that they had over there, and you look at the old school Democrats' response towards Zoran Mamdani to come towards the idea of ranked choice voting, you had Brad Lander and Zoran Mamdani, both of them cross-endorsed each other, and that was how they kept an old school like Andrew Cuomo from coming back into getting the nomination. But if you look at the visceral reaction against Mamdani and the Islamophobia that was directed towards them, it's clear that the Democrats are divided, and there is a lot more of a status quo bias in terms of preserving the old institutional order as opposed to letting the younger generation come through, and it's problematic. It's highly problematic. I think Anne was next, and then John.
Actually, I was going to say about the PBS and NPR and everything that has been slashed from that, and that I grew up. Well, no, my daughter grew up with Sesame Street, and with all that sort of stuff, and I think that one of the reasons that she is so well-rounded and all that sort of stuff is because she was taught at an early age, not just by me, but by that sort of thing about the differences, and that people are all that stuff. I was just surprised. Well, I shouldn't say surprised, appalled. Oklahoma just decided that they were going to get rid of the Sesame Street and put on this and put on something that is totally not public education ready, and it's a school that's totally uncredited, that's going to put out things to the kids that are totally anti Sesame Street, and that's what's happening in those red states. I mean, Oklahoma is number 50 in childhood development, so because of their schools are number 50, and yet they're doing this. I'm sorry, I get very disheartened.
No, and it's good to air frustrations. I think one of the crucial things,
thinking about how to counter them, because many times when there's so much going on, it can feel overwhelming and, to use Alison's word, helpless. So lots of times it's what can you do within your sphere of influence? What can you do at a local level? And I know John wants to go, but one question I wanted to pose, because we are, unfortunately, we're coming up towards the end of time, but one question I want to pose before, so you can actually think about things, is to think about how you could, it's coming to Preston's point about how to get involved. So how can you transform the everyday spaces, the working spaces, the schools, the community centers, and use them into laboratories for practicing what you think of as better citizenship and better democratic principles? Those are some of the ideas you can think about. Another thing is like, how can a lot of these diplomats, they're in the same paradigm, they think exactly the same way, but you've got experiences from different walks of life. You all have different professions. You can draw from different things that you use in your professional and your social circles, and you can turn them into new principles through communication and through innovation yourself. So those are some of the ideas that you can think about yourself to be more productive in terms of becoming good citizens. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Just another complexity for a more progressive perspective in government is that I read that the blue states are losing population to red states in great numbers because the blue states are too expensive for the poor and the lower middle class to survive. And they're going to lose, ergo, congressional seats just by numbers. And if they're going to adopt a culture that you're moved to someplace, it doesn't bode well. It's like somebody's been kind of asleep at the switch, maybe all of us, about just the cost of living with our elitist perspective in the blue states.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the elitism is definitely something where I think it's people away from the Democrat Party, and there was a lot of punching down long before Trump came into power, and you had the educated people from blue states and then everybody else, and it was snobbery, and it was, you know, a vice, which you talked about earlier during early bird. Snobbery is allegedly an ordinary vice, but it seemed to come out a lot more from educated people, and it felt a lot of people feel marginalized, and it's important to feel that type of pain. What I will say, though, is that there are people within the Democratic Party who are trying to change the messaging, but you are having the old school Democrats, as I mentioned, Mamdani, you're having old school Democrats go against them. So is it the type of thing where you just have a two-party system? Is that the type of thing that needs to change? In which case it requires an institutional change. Many people think the US is the best democracy. That's not what the rule of law index says. In fact, if you look at its rankings, they have 7 different criteria in which they look at in terms of rule of law and democratic principles. The US doesn't make the top 20 in any of the list. Not one. Yep.
So perhaps looking at, we talk about exemplars. You know, Anne was mentioning Sesame Street, good parenting. Lots of times people look at role models and what you can actually do to get good behavior. Aristotle was thinking about a virtuous person, what makes a virtuous person. And that's been the type of thing that Rachel Carson has talked about from an environmental perspective. How can you be an environmentally good person? You look towards role models that you can use. Well, it's the same thing for democratic principles. What actually makes a good citizen? And how do you actually exhibit that type of behavior? And what do you do? And then can you transform that into an institutional situation for reform? All right, who else wants to go next? Hal Christians.
A question that just came into my mind is, you know, we now have some of the people enforcing the MAGA policies are hanging out at the Home Depot to pick up people, find people to pick up, right? We've heard about that. What do we start with? What do we do when they start coming in here? That could happen. For them, for me, thinking that they go to the Home Depot that's as absurd as them coming here. And you know, we're probably on the list someplace. What are we going to do?
And that's something you need to be thinking about and being productive. I think there are 2 ways of thinking of it. The first is to be defensive, right? And think about all the potential threats that could be coming your way and try to put out fires before they actually happen. I don't think it's an either or. The other way of thinking is being more proactive and productive. And I think it needs to be a 2-pronged assault.
The other thing I wanted to say was that when I look back over the last several years and try to figure out where we lost control of this, I would think that I think that we were winning until we had all that Black Lives Matter stuff in the park, where the police were promoting violence and were anxious to escalate. And well, it was COVID too, and I didn't go to any of those protests, even though the Black Lives Matter guys, I figured they're on the right side, but it just didn't seem like it was worth it to me to be caught up in the struggle in a violent situation where I don't really know who's on the good side and who's on the bad side, as far as agents provocateur and all the rest of the crap. I didn't want to have to deal with that kind of crazy stuff. But at that point, I think is when the tide kind of turned against us. We were doing a lot. I kept protesting an awful lot, but we seemed to start losing a lot right around that time.
Well, it's interesting because with protests, it can always be a small group that does something.
And that can actually be applied to a collective where that may not have been the case. And I think making these sweeping generalizations can be very, very difficult and dangerous. And particularly the messaging in terms of how it happens, it can change in terms of how the media and society and opinions change. Go ahead, Anne.
About Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. I think that I think the right went crazy on that. And that they promoted, they looked at that and said, this is something where we can get in there and we can say these people are rioting and they're doing all these things, and Fox News and everybody, they always had something on about it, and so it made more more urgent and more awful than it really was, and that's a problem. I'm not sure how we can mitigate that.
Okay, I'm going to put Preston on the spot because as we're running out of time, Preston's the one who said we need to get involved. So I'm going to ask Preston for what his ideas are in terms of how we can get involved.
Well, as I said, I'm a real believer in ranked choice voting. That tends to minimize the ends of the political spectrum from being so dominant within the parties, whichever party it be, because moderates have troubles in either party to find outlets to get into office. And as I said, financially, I gave them a substantial chunk of money, and we'll see if the Pebworth, Washington, can manage to pull off ranked choice voting in Washington. It's, to me, one of the very few ways to make it happen. But on top of that, ranked choice voting, Pebworth, Washington has days we campaign in Olympia to buttonhole our representatives. We're trying to do what we can to make this process work. So that's where I am. This is politically neutral, by the way, as far as it goes, because it will run from very progressives to the Cato Institute will think that ranked choice voting is a good idea. But we are determined to live with party system that we have today. Sorry, I can't do that. And so I need to do something about this because I fear for democracy too.
So Preston's talking about doing an institutional change, and he's thinking about
by promoting an idea that a few states have started doing, but thinking about doing that widespread. What are some of the other ways that people think we can get involved?
I'd like to see more community. My little cul-de-sac where I live, I'm going to ask the folks there to write some letters. And this is something that I had, done. That they're going to a different state and asking for different, for good things, but something along those lines, so that you can get your people, the people that are around you, involved in something along those lines. And again, yes, it's something that would probably be more not Democrat, not Republican, but just something that everybody could do, would be, that kind of thing would be something that it would make you feel better, for one thing, and it will do some good.
Yeah, so these are civil society initiatives. Rather than thinking about institutional changes,
you also do things at a civil society which can foster bonds of community and bring people together to avoid the polarization that's happening. Does anyone else have any?
Go ahead, Margie.
Yeah, there's a group called Vote Forward. Some of you may have heard about it. They write letters to people urging them to vote, and they do not take sides. No mention is ever made of a party or a candidate, and it's just go vote. So I've written lots of letters, bought lots of stamps. So if you want to do that, it's something you can do at home. You don't need to get out on the street among possible violence. You can write letters.
Yep, and a comment from Jeremy who says, write those letters together to build up your community. Go ahead, Mike.
If you're going to be on social media, which I am to a certain extent, might be a good idea if there's a certain feed that you keep following. You might want to, if you see that this person who may be on your side, they feel that their approach is wrong, or they left something out, or there was something deceiving about their clickbait, I think you'd write in their comment section, call them on it and say, we need to improve our own quality in the argument here.
Okay, so you're talking about actual fact checking from that perspective.
Well, yeah, I saw a video clip by Rachel Maddow, and normally I go along with her, but this one was labeled, is Pam Bondi going to lose her job? But I saw the whole clip, and Pam Bondi, I don't think was mentioned once.
Yeah. So actually using it more as a community censorship of the information that's out there to try and do things from a more productive basis. Yeah.
Yeah, go for quality control.
Quality control. Very good. Any other suggestions for making productive steps in any sphere of our lives over here to try and strengthen democracy? Leslie, sorry, I didn't see that.
We can always buttonhole people at town hall meetings.
Yep, there's a collective way of doing it, and having more town hall meetings. There are representatives who are doing that, and so try to question, grow them together, come together as a collective, greater attendance at those. Anything else? Preston?
One simple thing. Yeah. I have no social media. Zero.
Yep. So avoid social media is another angle, because in that way you can pick different news sources for which there's John Dack.
About social media, I read a book a year ago about social media, and it's the extremes that drive social media. And the extremes are the ones that make money on social media. So I would go along with you if you can't avoid it, because you're dumping into an extreme environment. And if you say something that isn't extreme, that's moderate, you'll be dumped on by both extremes, left and right. And remember, it's not linear, it's circular. The extreme liberal is one step over to being an extreme conservative. I've seen that happen in group meetings where someone says, I was watching Rachel Maddow every night for a year, and now I can't get off of Fox News. And they just hopped over the next boundary. So extremes don't help us. We need to find this common ground somewhere in the middle.
That's right. And as Billy Joel said, he doesn't know why he goes to extremes. Sorry, not a bad music reference there. On my terrible jokes, does anyone have any comments? Or I can read my final notes as I've been scribbling away, and then we can wrap this up. Any other thoughts anyone wishes to share on this? Oh, yes. Only if you do it in Louis Armstrong's voice.
Now, we all know that natural disasters bring people of all different stripes together. So I think we should promote national.
Yeah, yes. So a perverse way of doing it. Yeah, perverse way of doing it. And you know what? Me singing is promoting a national disaster.
Careful what you ask for. That earthquake is ready to go.
Subduction zone.
I'll just say that almost every neighborhood in Portland has a neighborhood emergency team, where you can prepare for the natural disaster, but you still meet the same kinds of people, because there's lots of different stripes of people that want to be prepared for an emergency. So it's if you go, it's through PPM, through the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, and we're all volunteers. I belong to mine, and it's a good way to just kind of get prepared for an emergency and meet people that may not agree with you about it.
Say the link again, please.
Well,
something.
Yeah, it's neighborhood emergency teams. It's any team.
No, just neighborhood emergency team.
Yeah, then if you Google that, you get it.
Very good. Anyone else?
I think taking care of ourselves is so important to have energy, so that because when you're confronted with some of these negative, if you don't have energy, you just lose it. I mean, for me, I just lose it. But when I've taken care of myself, I have more patience with other people, and just taking care of ourselves, taking care of ourselves with good diet, exercise, coming to these meetings and gathering strength. Yeah.
Self-care is hugely important.
Yeah.
Paul Barker.
I don't know if it fits or not, but
Of course it does.
I just am reminded of a thing I saw some years ago where they said, I'm talking about the attitudes and stuff. They said, if you're a Blazer fan, this is for you, Todd. If you're a Blazer fan, you hate the Lakers. If they took all the Blazers, traded every Blazer player to the Lakers, totally swapped, would you still be a Blazer fan? And they said, yes. That's what we're up against.
Lovely sports analogy. Anyone else? Okay, and Jeremy has a point. Jeremy, which he says, stop doom scrolling, take media breaks, touch grass, and enjoy some green space. So that's a nice one as well.
Yeah, good one.
Okay.
Yes.
So because it's close to 11:25, I'll say my final comments before we get to announcements. And I've been penning a lot of the ideas that you've been coming, and I've tried to come up with something. So hopefully it sounds profound. And if it doesn't, well, it doesn't matter. So in Worswood Ho, Samuel Beckett wrote, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. Today, we've wrestled with the hard truth that traditional approaches to citizenship may not be enough for the challenges we face. But in acknowledging those limitations, we've also opened space for something new. For democracy to endure, citizens have had to reimagine what democracy means in their time, and our time is no different. The habits that brought us this far may need updating, but the impulse to keep trying, to fail better each time, that's what keeps democracy alive. So we leave here today not with easy answers, but with better questions. And perhaps most importantly, the knowledge that we're not going through this alone. We're going through this together, learning together, and tomorrow we'll try again, a little wiser, a little more connected, and maybe, just maybe, a little better at this messy, imperfect, essential work of being citizens. So thank yourselves very much today for today's discussion.